So welcome everyone to our 2021 CLUE Symposium. CLUE stands for Collaborative Learning of Usability Experiences. If possible, turn on your camera. We'd love to see everyone. I'm Audrey Jaward. I'm an associate professor at Carleton University. I'm also the director of CLUE. So CLUE is an NSERC funded training program for graduate students and undergrad and postdocs as well, that provides training beyond the student's degree program in the domain of usability and user experience. We've been running this program for 6 years now. It's hard to remember the pre-CLUE. And CLUE is actually coming to an end next month. So as the CLUE program is built on fantastic students and partners, we wanted our final symposium to focus on them. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'd like to thank the organizers of this symposium, so those that helped put it together, so Sonia Chiasson, Jing Kang, and Tamara Tork, as well as everyone who's been involved in the CLUE program from its inception, which includes many faculty members, industry partners, government partners, and most importantly, our students. We've had a lot of you, and it's been really great to see you all evolve. So this event is recorded and will be posted on the CLUE YouTube channels in a few weeks. And their CLUE YouTube channel has a lot of our past CLUE events, so go check it out. A lot of really interesting talks and courses. So we'll ask that all attendees keep their microphone muted when not speaking. And this will be, there will be live closed captioning during the event, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. For me, it turned on automatically, but if that's not the case for you, you can go in the closed caption settings and turning it on. So I'm really excited for the symposium. We have it in 3 parts this year to help with Zoom fatigue, to break it down a little bit. So day 1 features an Ask Me Anything session with our industry partners. And then we'll have 5 student end of internship presentations, which are presentations that we ask all of the students that do an internship to reflect on something that they've learned, whether it's about the actual work that they completed or something that they learned about the process and methodology, for example. So we have 5 of them. It's quite exciting. Day 2 is today. So we'll have an Ask Me Anything session with our government partners in this case, and then we have 10 students that will discuss their research. We'll also have a networking activity. So it's really a great element for that we've had in our in-person past symposium. So hopefully you'll join us and have really interesting conversation, get to know each other a little bit more. And finally, day 3 is Thursday at 3:30 p.m. like today. It will feature an Ask Me Anything session with our CLUE student alumni. And then we'll close this symposium with a presentation from Jing Kang, who is a postdoc and who has been analyzing the elements of the CLUE program in the last few months. He's talked to quite a few of you here and will present lesson learned. What is unique about our program? What worked really well? What could be improved if somebody wanted to do another similar type of program? So very interesting. I heard the rehearsal, something to listen to. So we're very much looking forward to questions from the audience throughout the events. And the Ask Me Anything session is all about answering your questions. So we've set up a poll where you can submit and vote for your questions. So you can go to pollev.com/ajaward. The link is posted in the Zoom chat, and we'll post it again regularly for those of you who are joining afterwards. It's also shared on the screen right now. And there's a box at the top that says answer or response. That's where you're meant to type your question. You can precede it by anyone or industry or government or student, depending on which session this should be designed for. So I'll give you a minute to look at the poll everywhere and then read a few questions, perhaps submit one, and then vote for your for the first question you want asked.
Yes, my name is Andrew. I work at the National Research Council at the Flight Research Laboratory. I'm part of the Aerospace Human Factors Group, and I work with Shelley Kelsey and other people that you may know that previously were part of the CLUE program. Cadence being one of them. So our lab is, or our group is dedicated to understanding how to improve health, safety, and performance during air travel. So we have a group of physiologists, psychologists, and engineers. I'm an engineer by training, and I've had the good fortune of working with and mentoring 2 CLU students over the last couple of years. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I'll ask a first question just to kind of introduce ourselves into the topic at hand. How did you find your first UX job? Ryan, do you want to start?
So shortly after my master's degree in design, product design, and before my product design degree, I was working for the government doing policy development. And so I didn't have the traditional path of going into product design or web or whatever. I kind of applied the design skills, the design research skills that I had to policy. And so I lucked out there, just translated most of the stuff directly to my job. And then after teaching and, you just get into the consulting business a little bit. And so I did more consulting and UX there. But it was really a natural transition from my previous background and then incorporating design to that.
Great. Andrew?
So I would say I don't have a typical background for someone in this field. My training is in biomedical engineering and very much focused on physiological signal processing. But my contribution to this area relates to trying to understand or develop better ways of understanding the internal state of a person while they interact with a complex system. So we use eye tracking, we use EEG, we use a number of physiological and behavioral measurements, and then try to relate that to subjective ratings, working with experts like test pilots to develop and refine better technologies for the aviation environment. So I'm learning a lot by the psychologists and human factors specialists that I work with, and I've learned a lot from the CLU students too. So I feel like I'm becoming more of a UX person, but it's not my background.
Well, I think that's kind of a recurring theme of there's sort of a lot of people who came into this field from other fields, and so you two are examples of this. Our industry partners yesterday also similarly. So Kath, do you want to?
Yeah, mine seems like it's a relatively, it kind of makes sense, the path. I started off as a graphic designer after studying in advertising. And then I discovered that was just too subjective for me. I liked coding better because you couldn't not like coding. It like works or doesn't work. And I really liked that, as opposed to people who didn't like my graphic design. Yeah, then it just kind of morphed into UX. And I spent the first 10 years of my career in the private sector. And then when I moved to government and I got, into Ryan's team, it made a lot of sense to take my understanding of web and, and design and UX and coding and work it into doing UX research for our tools and our products. It was a nice flow. It wasn't totally intentional, but it's worked out quite nicely. And like Andrew was saying, I've learned so much from our students. I mean, I bring a very practical, I've learned a lot on the job, and I don't have a ton of education in it, of formal education. And so the combination of the two has just been a wonderful experience of learning from people who have been taught properly. It's been great. Yeah.
Wonderful. Reham, are you still there?
I think we might have lost her.
Yep, I think so too. Well, hopefully she joins in for a few of the later questions. And okay, so that was a great start. So one of the questions that we have from the audience is specifically geared towards you is, what are the 3 things soon-to-be graduates should do if they aim to do UX for the government? Kat, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I saw this on the list yesterday, so I was thinking about it. Something that's different between, you know, government and say the private sector is we don't really have customers. We have clients, and it's not a huge difference, but it's like for immigration, for example, people have to, if they want to come to Canada, they have to go through our department. It's mandatory, right? So when you're thinking about the UX, it's not so much about like bringing people in. It's keeping them and making the experience better for them. It's life-changing for them, you know? And so considering from that perspective that it's I don't want to minimize like the private sector with you know, purchasing things online, for example, but if the person's pissed off, they can just go buy something somewhere else. If they want to come to Canada, we really need to take into consideration the emotional side of it and the making them feel dignified, making them feel welcomed. Ryan, you're the one who put all these words in my head when you were talking about how we need to like consider our clients. So that's one aspect of it. Another thing is to think about the constraints that you have within the government. There are a lot of them. And that's something that, you know, there's, you know, what we might call best practices or guidelines, but they're not guidelines. They're like hard and fast rules that we have to work within that we might not always want to work within. Yeah, those are 2 considerations. Can I like leave that open for other people to add more? Okay.
Of course. You can pick on, sort of, you can continue to answer, or sort of if somebody wants to jump in. Otherwise, perhaps Andrew, you want to share your considerations on sort of things that our graduates should think about when working for the government specifically?
I would say that it depends on what government department. So I can only speak for National Research Council. So for the NRC, we're kind of at the intersection of industry, government, and academia. So depending on the project, depending on the client, if it's internally driven or externally driven work, you might be using very different skills and working with very different constraints, even, you know, intellectual property constraints, budgetary constraints. So I think for an organization like NRC, you need to have a core competency, something that you're really good at, but also, you know, an ability to switch and contribute to a number of different projects. So if you have some ability in data science, good survey design, good in statistical analysis, those are some of the key capabilities that you need to work in a research organization. And then once you have that kind of baseline knowledge and ability, then you can change hats and contribute to different projects effectively. So, but I'm sure it's very different for other government departments.
Which question are we doing? Like, what consideration should you have when working in the government in the UX position?
Yeah, the exact question is, what are the 3 things soon-to-be graduates should do if they aim to do UX in the government?
Okay, I would just add, like, from my perspective, I would add, it's a skill that I didn't necessarily know that I need to have, or I need to like from a technical background, I didn't realize I need to have, but it's something about how to be a user advocate and with other people. So it's about culture change. It's about talking to people about UX and how to convey its value. So I think it's something very subtle in your personality that you would need to develop as well or consider, from my perspective at least, because sometimes you would find, I would say, what's the word? Like
Jerky
sometimes people.
Resistance, maybe, is that the word you're looking
Yes,
for?
yes, exactly. Resistance. And I was trying to be diplomatic.
Yeah, no, resistance.
Resistance, exactly. Yeah, in some mindsets. So you would have to be flexible enough to talk about it, and also while maintaining good relationships.
Nice.
That's a really great point. Kat knows and Reham knows the part of the interview process that we had at Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship was ability to listen. So we had a team that was pretty diverse. We had social workers, anthropologists, behavioral scientists, designers, all over the place, policy analysts. You had to be able to listen to their criticism. You could have, some people have a hate on for qualitative research or quantitative research. And if you were so stuck on your research method and you couldn't see the value of someone else's opinion, then you weren't right for it. That was one of the things that we looked for. The other thing that we looked for was resilience. So, you know, this movement around designing with users in the government is still relatively new. There are new policy guidelines and directives that force us to do this more and more, but it is not natural yet in the government. So you will meet that resistance. So being able to overcome that while still listening, I think is really, really important. The other thing that I would say is, like, in a very practical way, designers in the government, and I'm just being mean right now, don't build glorified shampoo bottles, right? We don't build products in that way. And so there really is this social impact that you're doing. And so ways of showing that you are passionate about social issues, environmental issues, have this purpose in mind, whether it's volunteering or doing hackathons or all that kind of stuff, are all very, very valuable in a career, and shows that the director or the manager or whoever is hiring you, that you actually are interested in making this change, right? And that it's not just a job, because the job is actually quite hard because you meet resistance, because you don't have allies around you all the time. And so you really, really need to want to do it.
That's really interesting. So I have kind of a bit of a follow-up question regarding this line. So sometimes we've heard this sort of from the industry, especially kind of in smaller companies, that people need to argue their way into a UX position. Was UX present in your government sort of department when you joined, or did you have to argue and justify for a UX position in the organization?
Ryan.
There was, people wanted to, they just didn't know how, right? So before I started, they created a new group called the Client Experience Branch. And they just hired a new director general in charge of that. And at that time, I was working at the Privy Council office, and they came up to me and said, "Hey, can you help us do journey maps?" Right? You know, nice and easy. They had read some of the lingo. They're trying to like build their like database of artifacts and stuff like that so they can make decisions. And I asked them what they were doing. Oh, you know, we're kind of like thinking about it and brainstorming and drawing these like beautiful pictures. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, where are the people? Are you talking to people? Are you interviewing people? And that, I'm really lucky that the director general wanted to like jump in head first and like say, okay, let's do this right. And so we created this whole program around interviewing people and targeting around one specific program area called Family Class. And in that process, I think we interviewed about 200 people over the course of 2 weeks, and really ideated and refined and iterated, presented all our conclusions up all the way up to the minister. And when that happened, everyone's eyes lit up and we're like, wow, like this is rich. This makes sense to me. And it was really lucky. Our next minister after that had actually worked in the community as a community executive director. And when he saw some of our videos or artifacts from some of these design challenges, it completely resonated with him. And he was like, oh my gosh, I finally understand that the department understands what people go through. It was our work as designers that actually gave him confidence in the department in that way. So it was really, that's how it happened.
Yeah. Can I speak a little bit to the resistance that we run into that Reham sort of touched on? So because the idea was new, and yes, the minister was on board, but some feedback that we hear fairly regularly is we have people on staff who are expert designers, who are experts at making forms, who are experts at writing letters, who are experts at, you know, whatever it is that we're suggesting gets tested. And why do we need to go out and ask the public what they think? We don't need them to someone's at my door. We don't need to go, it's Amazon. We don't need to go to the public and ask them to design for us. We don't need them to tell us how to do our jobs. This makes us look like we don't know what we're doing, and this is the government and we're publicly funded and we can't be having this appearance that we need to keep yada yada. I've had this conversation like about 10,000 times, and what I've realized is that until people see it in government, at least until they see it in action, it's just really tough to understand that, you know, we're so stuck with our lingo. We're so stuck in our lines of business. Like if I work in temporary residence in work permits, I know the ins and outs of everything to do with work permits. And maybe I don't realize that, you know, everyone abroad has no idea. But when I sit down and I watch, you know, 4, 5, or 6 people struggle with the exact same thing in the exact same form, all of a sudden then I'm like, oh my God. And as soon as people see that, as soon as our internal partners see that, they are like obsessed with us. They want to test everything. They want to tell everyone to test everything. They want to talk to the clients all the time. They come back. I mean, we have so many projects going on right now. It's insane. It's actually, I was actually just in a meeting before this saying we're going to have to maybe say no to a couple things right now because we're just too busy. But the resistance really is there, and it doesn't come from a bad place. Everyone's doing the best that they can. Everyone's trying really, really hard to make the experience good for clients. They just don't know until they see it. And then when they see it, it's night and day. But yeah, just to agree with what Reham and Ryan are both saying, there is resistance, and it is, you do have to be the advocate. You do have to constantly feel like you're pushing for this, but the reward is just never ending. It's amazing.
Andrew, anything to add to this conversation?
So in terms of resistance, I can't say that I've experienced that at NRC. I think one of the challenges would be changes in priority that happen rapidly. You know, for example, with COVID-19, there was a number of projects that were put on hold, a number of new projects that came online, changes in priority that I would say are good in some respects, but it does put some stress on the team because you're trying to juggle multiple things. You're trying to keep your existing research area active while fulfilling the mandate, the top-down mandate that can change with different governments, can change with different programs. But I think, you know, we do try to support Transport Canada. We try to support Environment Canada. We try to support the other government departments with their mandates. And I guess the nice thing about NRC is that though these other government departments or external clients will come to us with specific questions and needs, And so it's quite rewarding in that sense that it's not that we're necessarily convincing other people that this should be done. They've already convinced themselves and we're supporting them. So yeah, I have nothing bad to say about NRC or any resistance so far. It's just the changes in priorities that can be sometimes difficult to overcome because there's some inertia, right? You get momentum in your area and all of a sudden you have to pivot. It's all interesting work, but yeah, that's what I would add. Great,
thank you. Okay, so next question is focused really for our graduates. And I'm combining two questions if you were following on that. So what are the best strategies for applying and securing UX jobs, and especially when it comes to portfolio? That's kind of a common thing, especially in industry. Is that something that's expected when you apply for UX jobs in the government, and sort of any advice on that front?
I can say that I don't know if this is what you want to hear, but the government hiring structure doesn't include portfolios. So, I mean, at least in our department, it's not part of, I mean, I'll, excuse me, I'll look at them. If someone is just kind of cold calling me and sending me a resume and there's a link to a portfolio, I'll absolutely go look at it. I'm very interested in it, but it isn't part of our formal hiring process. Our hiring process involves filling out a really, really long application, and then there's a test, and then there's an interview, and then there's reference checks, and there's nothing to do with a portfolio. And we're not even supposed to consider a portfolio. However, on our team, at least, we hire a lot of term positions. So in that sense, we don't have to go through a like formal competition. We'll choose someone, hire them for maybe 6 months or a year. And then after that, like hopefully during that point of time, if things are going well, they'll apply to a competition. In that sense, if I'm hiring a term or our team is hiring a term, we would look at portfolios. I can't really say though what specifically, like I don't have a lot to add on what to show other than what Ryan was saying about like community involvement and whatnot. What are you gonna say, Ryan?
And I think, so yes, Kat is absolutely right. The formal process in government is like what she described. It's slowly changing too, right? So the more designers that come into the government, the more UXers, the more whatever data scientists, the more they customize their hiring process. So they'll want to see code, they'll want to see your GitHub repository, they'll want to see your portfolio, whatever it may be. And I'd say for me, when I look at portfolios, what I'm looking for is thinking process. So are you articulating how you got to the place that you got to, right? Why did you choose those things? What were your research questions? You know, how did you come to that conclusion? Where was your aha moment? How are you able to communicate that? Is it crystal clear what your aha moment was, or were you just following technical specs, right? Those are the things that I look for when I review a portfolio.
And Andrew, what about the NRC kind of to the hiring process? Any advice?
So our process for a competitive posting involves well, I can speak from my experience. I don't know if it's true across NRC. So submission of a prior publication or technical report, a presentation, about a 30-minute presentation on a relevant research topic. So that could be from your master's thesis or you know, other research activities you've done. And then there are a number of technical and behavioral competencies that are evaluated primarily through Q&A. So we identify specific you know, scenarios and ask how you would design an experiment to address that particular question, or how you would deal with, you know, certain types of challenges, how you would improve your knowledge of an area that you don't have prior knowledge in, just so we can gauge your your potential as a researcher to do independent research in many different areas.
Okay, thanks. Alexia, I think you have a question.
It was just a follow-up question to Ryan. You were talking about aha moment. Like, what specifically would you be referring to in terms of like previous research? Does that make sense to the question?
You're muted.
You're muted. COVID life.
So you're talking about how to describe a aha moment?
No, just what kind of, like, do you mean in terms of why you wanted to go into this kind of field, kind of moment, or more in terms of your findings? And
Yeah, more about your findings. I mean, narrative in your story, I think, always matter, right? So, like, the team that I work with know that I am a person of color, that I am gay, that I have these like weird backgrounds in eclectic, like ADD, like academic, you know, course in my career. And that adds to, I think, a perspective that sometimes other people don't share, right? So being able to, I like working on projects where I could advocate for people, for example, right? So we've worked on projects around disabilities in the workplace. We've worked on things around, you know, how to bring energy literacy to a more like general population, or kids and Indigenous people. You know, one project that Kat and I and Reham worked on was on settlement, how people settle into Canada. And one of the like major aha moments that I had, at least on one specific area, was people with HIV, because they were going through the medical process. And if you came from a country that there's a huge stigma against LGBTQ2S people, they never get tested. They never get tested, right? And so you're finding out based on medical exams that you had to do via the immigration process. And we found a letter where people found out that they were HIV positive from immigration, which is like shocking and scary. And so one of the projects that Kat and team worked on was like, how do we add dignity to these letters? Right? That was one of our things that we worked on. So I think being able to describe those like holy moly moments when you're doing your research and conveying the need to take action is so important, so important. And so I recognize that there are like introvert and extrovert and, you know, people out there. There are many ways of going about this. Sometimes it's videos, right? So you don't have to be the one doing it, but being able to convey these moments, I think, is really, really powerful.
right, thank you. And that was really interesting, by the way.
Yes. That comes to an end of the time we had for the discussion. It's been really interesting, and it's kind of you guys have a different perspective than how UX is done in industry, and I think that panel highlighted that, and that was really nice to know and to understand kind of the difference in the constraints, and everybody has constraints in their work, but you have different ones and different things that it's really important to focus on. The humanity of your clients, I think, is sort of at the forefront of your work. So that's really great. So thank you to the four of you for having shared your experience and your thoughts.